Welcome to the Investing in Intelligence show, where we talk about artificial intelligence companies, stocks, and trading. I'm James here with my co host Kai, and today we will be talking about Apple. I just want to remind you that the opinions expressed on this podcast are just that, opinions. They should not be taken as specific advice to invest in a particular way. Now, Apple just kicked off their annual developers conference, which they always start with a big keynote on new releases. The last 40 minutes of this year's 2-hour keynote was completely focused on AI. Just like they co-opted the word phone for iPhone, they have officially co-opted the abbreviation AI. So now you'll never know if AI means artificial intelligence or Apple Intelligence. The new AI stuff largely failed to impress, such as their on-device image model that can only do cartoon-style images rather than photorealistic images.
And choose from animation, sketch, or illustration.
Apple attempted to convince us that their new AI is more than just informational, but rather can take action. But asking the new Siri AI to play a podcast isn't all that different from what Siri could do previously. Apple did have an impressive Siri AI demo.
Siri is going to be able to help me do this so easily. Siri, when is my mom's flight landing? What's awesome is that Siri actually cross-references flight details that my mom shared with me by email with real-time flight tracking to give me her up-to-date arrival time. What's our lunch plan? How long will it take us to get there from the airport? I haven't had to jump from mail to messages to maps to figure out this plan.
And although that demo showed zero action from Siri, it did show an impressive understanding of your personal data. Apple's way of keeping your data secure is apparently to do most AI on device, and when performing AI in the cloud, to require the cloud computers to use ARM-designed Apple chips.
Many of these models run entirely on device. There are times, though, when you need models that are larger than what fits in your pocket today. Private cloud compute allows Apple Intelligence to flex and scale its computational capacity and draw on even larger server-based models for more complex requests, while protecting your privacy. These models run on servers we've especially created using Apple Silicon. These Apple Silicon servers offer the privacy and security of your iPhone from the silicon on up.
The limitations of Apple's current AI models were very apparent during the keynote, such as in how any advanced information requires Siri to get help from ChatGPT.
And we're starting out with the best of these, the pioneer and market leader ChatGPT from OpenAI, powered by GPT-4o. First, we build support into Siri, so Siri can tap into ChatGPT's expertise when it might be helpful for you. For example, if you need menu ideas for an elaborate meal to make for friends using some freshly caught fish and ingredients from your garden, you can just ask Siri. Siri determines that ChatGPT might have good ideas for this, asks your permission to share your question, and presents the answer directly.
One of the highlights for investors was that new features will require an iPhone 15 or higher. But unfortunately, for those believing in the AI PC hypothesis, you can use Apple's 4-year-old laptops for new AI features.
Apple Intelligence harnesses the power of our most advanced silicon and will be available on iPhone 15 Pro and iPad and Mac with M1 and later.
So this won't be igniting a MacBook refresh cycle. All right, so before we get into Apple, the company, and financials, what do you think about this announcement? You heard everything that I saw notable in it. So Kai, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I watched good deals. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing through and through, but I watched different parts. And I heard a lot of what we call or CEO talk, a lot of word vomit at times. For example, there was one part where it was like, oh, let me show you what this new operating system can do. I can move the apps around this nice photo on the front part of your phone. That wasn't the AI portion. That was an excellent presentation, James. I mean, excellent. Great summary. Very impressed. Apple should look to hire James Gibson potentially to get their point across.
The
point is I'm
what they
underwhelmed.
announced.
Okay, so let me see. The point is I'm a little underwhelmed. I think that the reaction potentially initially was underwhelming in regards to Apple. I think closed the day 3% down in the market. So I don't think the market liked. Would you agree? I don't think the market initially liked what they heard. And there may have been a little mixed reaction in regards to I expected or potentially expect Apple to come out with their own AI. So their own ChatGPT, their own Gemini, And because my life is completely integrated into Apple devices on a daily basis, meaning my computer is hooked to my phone and my AirPods, I don't have a Vision Pro. I expected that would be the most integrative part of what I could see a personal change in my life in regards to having a conversation with my personal device that I have that I'm spending 4 hours of screen time a week on, and being able to have a conversation in regards to informational lookup and that device potentially looking and streamlining my workflow on a regular basis. Would you agree? That's what I wanted to see.
Well, a few things to pick out there. First of all, they are doing their own AI, and there was some confusion. Elon Musk tweeted, "Oh, Apple can't even make their own AI. They have to hire ChatGPT." Well, so they do have their own AI built in here, but it's small models. Okay, there's a huge difference between small language models and large language models. So Apple has built some smaller, lightweight models that can run on the iPhone and do things like pull out the last podcast that your wife sent you or figure out where your mom said you're going to go from your text messages. So those things it can do, you just can't put a large language model on a little phone right now. And even if you could, Apple probably doesn't have the GPUs necessary to build their own large language model on the same level as ChatGPT.
I want I want to be able, here's the link for this YouTube video that you just put out, Apple. Summarize it for me, Siri. Give me 10 points on how I want them to be able to I want to be able to put in data, multiple papers, multiple analyses, multiple meta-analysis studies, and say, Apple, summarize this paper. I just did this with ChatGPT. I looked at a meta-analysis from 2014 that synthesized 135 studies, and I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, give me a summary. And you know what? I read the whole entire paper, and ChatGPT's summary was excellent. Excellent. I was actually shocked. I was going to message you right away. I want Apple to do that. And I was underwhelmed because I sort of expect Apple to come out with their own instead of looking to Microsoft to fill the gap. Why don't they just wait until their own AI is ready? Why are they filling the gap with ChatGPT? That's my sort of understanding. Was that your take?
Yeah, I think there are a couple reasons why they don't wait. So first of all, there's a lot of pressure from investors. Investors want to see that they're doing something with AI already. And secondly, they have to be careful. So if they give their AI the power to do all sorts of things, it's going to cause all sorts of problems. So what they're doing instead is giving it the ability to do small things that you probably would do anyways, but now it'll save you time with Siri AI. Also, they can't step on the feet of other apps. So if they give their base operating system the ability to go book an Uber for you and you accidentally book 15 Ubers, or let's say they give your phone the ability to purchase something off of Amazon through the Amazon app, but it accidentally purchases 5,000 Hello Kitty dolls, well, they're liable for that purchase. So, in other words, how much agency, the term is agency, making something an agent allows it to take actions. How much agency they give Siri, they have to be very careful with. So, there are unintended consequences now. But what you're describing, just like summarizing a paper, something like that, you're right. It should be able to do that. And unfortunately, Apple just can't do that yet with their own model and their own services. So, a lot
James,
of questions come in.
the beauty of what I found, what I've started to integrate ChatGPT in my regular life is it's sort of I have a question, I get on Google, I try to type a search, and then I have to click links to find the answer. I can just get on ChatGPT, OpenAI, and have a conversation in regards to my questions. Let me give you an example. Can my truck pull this particular type of boat? Well, then I have to get on, look up the specs of the truck, look up the specs of the boat, calculate the weight, which would require multiple searches or multiple investigative time, or me spending a lot of time looking up the data. And all I had to do was ask ChatGPT and ask them a question.
But the important thing is if you saw in the video, they've integrated ChatGPT. So you can just ask Siri now, and then Siri, unfortunately, will throw one more step in there and say, hey, do you want me to get this info from ChatGPT? And you say yes, and it'll go and get that info.
It's the one more step. You just said it. I don't want one more step. I want one less step.
I think it comes out equal because you would have to open the Open AI ChatGPT app anyways.
But how awesome would it be to be in a world where you be like, it knows you have a trip, you've talked about it, it can hear the things you're talking about sometimes in your phone. Security is an obvious issue. Okay, for the listeners out there, I'm talking about this being secure, and then it being able to say, oh, you have a trip where you're going to see X, Y, and Z. Let me provide some restaurant recommendations for you. Here's a cheaper flight for you. Here's what the weather's going to be, James. Make sure you pack X, Y, and Z. Like,
it's going to do all that in 6 months. So everything you're describing, it's going to do that 6 months from now.
I tell you what, on the last podcast, we talked about a little bit about my top AI companies. Okay, Microsoft was in there, Nvidia's in there. I said Apple should be in there. I'm pulling it back out. I'm pulling it back out after this.
It's going to do it pretty much has ChatGPT and it has all your info on the iPhone. So obviously I was skeptical and critical in that little presentation or video that I made, but part of that was just clickbait. I put the title for that video was like Apple AI sucks. We got to try and get our clicks we got to try and get above 100 subscribers here.
You're learning to play the game. People subscribe to our podcast. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up, including Broadcom, we're going to talk about Broadcom. I would offer you like a new iPhone or something because it's going to be trash. The iPhone 15 apparently is not going to. Now, so they mentioned this. You have to have the particular type of chip, right, in order to have sort of the AI processing. So some of their devices will be able to do integrative AI, and some of the old iPhones won't. So part of the thing I did like to hear from a company standpoint, it may make me upgrade my iPhone 12 to so does the iPhone 15 come with that? So do you know that? I was going to look that up. Maybe I need to chat GPT ask that question. Is the iPhone 15 have the...
So I've heard some conflicting things, but I've heard one source say only the iPhone 15 Pro will be able to do it, not the normal iPhone 15, but I think both will. So let's get into brass tacks here. 17% of the world owns an iPhone. Apple, obviously, as you know, has 2 billion customers around the world. Now, here's the problem. They're not charging any money for these AI features. So it's not going to go into their services batch of income, but it is going to potentially push an iPhone cycle. Now, it's not going to push a Mac cycle because the Macs that are 3 or 4 years old are going to run this perfectly fine. So you don't need to buy a new Mac. Most people won't need to buy a new Mac laptop to get these features. But most people, meaning well over half, will need a new iPhone if they want these features. So it does. So once again, stock went down yesterday because people needed time to digest. And then this morning, you've got the analysts coming out, upgrading the stock, saying, hey guys, this is going to potentially drive a pretty big iPhone refresh. And we know that the vast majority of Apple's income comes from iPhones. Now, I will say though, they've been declining. Like this is a company in decline, and we might disagree on that, but look, 2.8% decline in revenue from 2022 to 2023, 2.3% decline in iPhone sales from 2022 to 2023. iPads down, sales down 3 years in a row for iPads, wearables, home accessories, AirPods, all of that declined 3.38% from 2022 to 2023. This is a company in decline. They have to do this in order to avoid becoming the next Cisco or AT&T or name whatever big tech company that was huge before that gradually died off and became a dinosaur stock. So if they don't want to become the next dinosaur stock, they have to integrate this stuff at whatever cost just to maintain relevancy with Microsoft, Google, and these other big companies, and of course, OpenAI.
In the beginning there, I kind of heard a lot of positive things, what you're saying about Apple. Then I heard some negative things. And what I'm understanding is that you're communicating is that if AI is integrated appropriately into Apple, Apple could essentially be a very good play in regards to a long investment. However, if Apple doesn't do this right, if Apple fails at this, their sales on a lot of their items are in decline. Now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I do see people still using Mac products and iPhones, etc. I do. I think Apple has a lot of competition. I think it's a good company. So then my question for you, James, is we talked about the top 4 AI plays, right? The AI companies, top 4. Is Apple in your top 4?
So you said in some years you see everybody still using Apple
10
computers,
years, I
whatever,
still I
whatever.
still think every majority of Americans are
Well,
using
guess what?
iPhones.
Well, guess what? Everybody's still using AT&T 10 years after it was a popular stock. So the answer is no, Apple is not in my top 4. Well, but that's the point. Look, the market rewards growth.
I think it depends on price point on the company in which you buy it. And I think in regards to investing, if you can buy Apple at a discount, Apple's a good company, has good numbers, and people are still using Apple products.
It's not at a discount.
I'm not talking about right now. I'm saying what goes up must come down. Eventually, the stock market will pull back. Eventually, there will be a 10% pullback. Eventually, there will be a bear market at some point in the future, and Apple is a good buy and adding to your portfolio. Full disclosure, I do have a large position in Apple. We have to disclose those sorts of things, right, James? I don't. Do you, what about you? Do you have any position in Apple?
I bought it last night. It dropped 2% last night after the announcement, and I did a starting position in Apple last night.
Why?
Because I think we're going to get better growth. Basically, the iPhone 15 thing, because I think people are going to have to buy iPhones in order to get these features. And I do think the features will be popular. You and I love ChatGPT. With them integrating this at the base level of the OS, the operating system, people are going to catch on. Normal people like your brother, your family, people who wouldn't be using ChatGPT otherwise, since it's more difficult to use, will wind up trying it on the iPhone. So I do see a massive, I do see a massive cycle here, but we don't know that it's going to last.
Say two things in regards to Apple business that, you know, not going to be, I'm not a rocket science in regard to, I'm not the CEO of Apple. I'm not on a major board of any of these companies. However, I do think two particular parts of Apple, maybe Apple could steal a large share from Google. I mean, if you are getting rid of Google and it's Siri or ChatGPT and how you are basically searching for data on the internet, maybe perhaps Apple can steal a large portion of revenue from Google in regards to its advertising. Number one. Number two, I do see that there is probably areas of growth within Apple that are something like it, for example, their cloud, and what they're charging for their cloud, just like something like Amazon Prime, as well as their streaming services. I do see a lot of potential there in regards to Apple TV. I mean, let me give you an example. If you have you're taking pictures, you have thousands of stored photos. We have the potential today where you don't necessarily have to buy an external hard drive. You can just keep it in the cloud. And so you're going to continue to increase your cloud data. You're going to continue to hold that. And so the revenue stream from that, I continue to see will grow. Would you agree with that or no?
I'm sharing a chart of AT&T.
Oh, we're
Okay, you
going to
can
talk, but we can
see.
debate AT&T. We can debate
No,
AT&T.
we're debating whether or not Apple is going to become AT&T or Cisco or one of these other companies that have been commoditized. I probably didn't say that. Commoditized. Okay, so when your product becomes a commodity, you don't have any growth. So essentially, this is the concern here. Apple is not growing. They are in decline. I cannot make that clear enough. So when you talk about, oh, buy it on a pullback, you're buying a company that's in decline, that doesn't have growth. The stock market rewards growth. It doesn't matter how small your company, how big your company. It doesn't matter if your company sells gasoline on the side of the road like Casey's General Store, or if it's OpenAI, the biggest growth AI play in the world. You must be growing. Apple is shrinking. It is not growing. So right now, if you buy it on a pullback, you're buying a company that is shrinking, not growing. And if they become a commodity, like for example, if everyone just owns an iPhone but doesn't really care, they're not trying to buy the next Apple product, then it's going to look like this chart right here. And this AT&T chart, you can see from 2000 peaked around $40, and ever since 2000 has been gradually down, and now we're at $17. Apple stock can do that. That is the risk here.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. I think James is right. I will say though, there are certain areas that aren't necessarily commodity growth or iPhone, and I'm talking about advertising revenue. I'm talking about app revenue. I'm talking about cloud
Well,
revenue.
let's talk about that then. So, are you aware that most of their service revenue comes from App Store fees and Google's payment for being the default browser in Safari. Those two things. Okay, so once again, when you buy an app in the App Store, they take whatever 20, 30%. I think it varies based on whether it's Europe or the US, but they take a slice of that, and there's significant pressure on them to cut that slice, and they've already started kind of doing that. And Google is paying them billions of dollars to be the default browser in Safari. But Google probably isn't going to do that anymore if they're integrating AI, especially Microsoft and OpenAI's AI, on the base level of their OS. So these two things are actually somewhat under threat. So you talk about service revenue and how it has better margins. Those things are potentially in trouble.
Well, yeah, that's why I think they're at an inflection point, and I do think it's kind of a it's a really big. These next 2 years for Apple are really big years. It's something that I'll follow along very, very closely because I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that Apple, though, is poised to still be able to lead the way in a lot of these particular fields in regards to search, in regards to cloud, in regards to a lot of those. And the reason is because of their hardware devices that are so integrated into our everyday life. And I think in regard, at least the United States, they went out over Android. They went out over other computer products. However, maybe that will change. The iPhone is a powerful force. So,
But it doesn't need to change. In order for them to become a commodity like company with no growth and a declining stock, it doesn't need to change. No one needs to take their market share. Google doesn't need to take market share in phones. The point is, if they're not selling more phones, more and more and more and more, if their growth isn't picking up, the stock will go down. You have to have growth. So that's the idea of the commodity like stock, like AT&T. I still use AT&T. I know a lot of people who still use AT&T, even though we're still using it so many years later. If they're not growing, the stock isn't going up. So therein lies the problem. And we've kind of beat this point to death. But last thing I'll say on that is they're trying to fake their growth. So they're buying back stock. Earnings per share, there are two things in that calculation. There's the amount of earnings and there's the amount of shares. Now, if they buy back stock, that reduces the amount of shares. So it makes EPS look higher than it really is. So they're essentially cheating to make it look like their earnings per share is going up. They're using their cash to buy back stock. I think they should probably use their cash to buy little companies. Like, it would have been great if they bought OpenAI, like 49% OpenAI would have been a good purchase because now they're doing a deal with OpenAI anyway. So that would have been a good purchase, but instead Microsoft did that. So yeah, and essentially they're faking their growth by buying back stock to make EPS look higher. It's not a great overall picture, but oh, the other thing I should say, two more things. And I know you're going to hate me because I'm coming out a little more bearish, but I did say I bought it last night. Okay, I did an opening position last night. But last thing I should say on this, is that there's this narrative. There are a lot of false narratives. Keep in mind, Kai, Apple traditionally has been the most owned stock in the stock market. Okay, it was the biggest stock before Microsoft and Nvidia crept up. It was like the biggest stock, and it was in pretty much every ETF, like every big S&P ETF. Pretty much every big hedge fund held it. Everyone held Apple. It was number one. So one of the big narratives that the bazillions of that the 99% of people who own stocks and happen to own Apple pushed was that, hey, Apple's a fast follower. So look, they didn't invent the smartphone, but they came out and they built the iPhone. So instead of doing something with a keypad, they took their time. They made a smartphone that was better than the BlackBerry and the Nokia and all of those. So the idea is they're a fast follower. They didn't have the first laptop computer, but they came out with the MacBook and it was better than the other laptops. So they're a fast follower. They come out with a better product than everybody else's. Well, guess what? That, in my opinion, is now a lie because we've had Apple TV, which was trying to fast follow Netflix and it hasn't overtaken Netflix. And we've had the Vision Pro, which is trying to fast follow the Meta Quest. And it isn't even nearly as popular as the Meta Quest. I mean, they probably sell 50 Meta Quest for every Apple Vision Pro, but it's not just price also. It's just that you can play games on the Meta Quest.
okay, gaming, yes, but I don't want to speak into a Vision Pro. However, I would love a Vision Pro. I have a Meta Quest. I mean, James and I every now and then play. I promised James and lost a bet, and so now I play with him a particular game. Sometimes I will say that the Vision Pro for the price point, I'll wait till it is lowered in price. It's just too hard. Over $3,000 when the Meta Quest is what, less than 1,000. I mean, and you can buy the two for $200 to $300. There's not a lot of people that could really spend $3,000 to $4,000. That's an entire paycheck for a lot of people. And so I think
But you
Apple's going
expect to
to
see
have
some
to.
sales. I mean, sales are really, really, really bad for it. I mean, really bad. It's almost like they're not selling any. I mean, it's really bad, the situation for the.
If they were to charge $200 more than the Meta Quest, even their best, the highest, not the Meta Quest 3 or the Pro or whatever it is, if they were to charge $200 more, there would be a lot more sales for it. Over $3,000 is a huge price point. The iPad was cheaper than the MacBook, and people bought the iPad. I didn't really see a huge utility in the iPad, but people integrated the iPad into their everyday life and use, etc. I was just like, why buy an iPad? Just buy a MacBook. I think that the Vision Pro price point is way overshot, in my opinion. So
Yeah, look, so what do we have coming out this year for Apple products? Well, at the end of the year, we're going to have some more releases. So I'm on macrumors.com here. They have a buyer's guide, tells you when they expect things to be released. So it looks like iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 and iPhone SE, of course. It looks like all of them will be released at the end of the year. So it says approaching end of cycle here. I think they expect it to. So it's been 270 days since the last release of the iPhone 15. On average, they updated every 365 days. So every year. So we've got less than 100 days left until they're expected to update the iPhone to iPhone 16. So that's coming. And I think that's the only thing I see that looks good. You're right. They're going to come out with a headset that's smaller and thinner. It might be a year from now, it might be 2 years from now, but they will come out with a smaller, thinner, cheaper headset. And that's why they called this one the Vision Pro. So they did the same thing with laptops. They come out with a MacBook Pro in 2016. I purchased it, and then months later they came out with the MacBook. So they come out with the Pro version first, and then the entry level after that. Even Tesla did the same thing. They had the Model S, and then later the Model 3. So sometimes it's easier for these companies to build the full out one, and then kind of trim that down into a smaller, cheaper, lighter, easier to buy model after that.
it's been interesting. We would have to do another even episode on Apple. Please look forward to our next episodes. We're going to talk about Broadcom and some other companies. I really want to talk about TXN. Last thing I would just sort of point out, just a macro trend, and you're right, James, you are right. EPS, there has been no EPS growth over the last 2 to 3 years with Apple. I mean, you're talking about a 5.5, $5.5, 5.5 to 6 to 6.1. I mean, however, Apple as a company has shown consistent EPS growth for the 10 to 15 years prior to that.
But it's even the EPS growth is fake. Like they're buying back stock to fake their EPS growth. So you have to look at revenue growth. You can't even look at the EPS growth. That's my point.
James is correct. But let me go back and just in general talk about something Warren Buffett talked about, and it is something that's true. Is that looking for companies that have good financials, a lot of cash, a lot of asset to liability ratio, and a product that's going to be utilized. I don't think Apple's going to turn into AT&T. However, it's something to follow along very closely. I was not impressed with their last earnings call. And the stock shot up. Apple was trading in the 170s, about to hit to 160. And if you remember back to last summer, Apple is just now getting back to where it was last summer. It was about to hit 200. We are just now crossed the 200 psychological resistance level. And it's taken a whole year. So let me just point this out. If you bought Apple last summer, you were just now breaking even. You're just now breaking even on your investment. So,
Yeah, you mentioned Warren Buffett. He's actually been selling Apple. They did some of their first selling of Apple over the past year. I am a buyer around 170, 180. The Morningstar price target is around 170. They think fair value is 170. We've had a bit of a run up into this announcement, and unfortunately, it shot up even higher after the announcement. So I don't know if we'll be seeing 170 again anytime soon. That's a pretty big move down. Was that 15% down from where we are now? I don't see us going back to 170. I wish I bought some more then, but I just had money tied up and everything else. So that would have been a good buy. 170 wouldn't have been a good buy. I can't say that 200 or 205 or whatever it's at this exact moment is a great buy.
yeah, I'm not going to chase Apple. I've had a lot of position in Apple. I bought I did a swing trade when it dropped down to 170. You and I actually had a phone call. We were talking about this. We looked into both Google and Apple both. I think it was the Gemini release, not Gemini release, but there was the Gemini news, and there was all of this news about sort of the leadership at Google in regards to some of their and some other things. And basically Google dropped into the 130s and Apple dropped down into like the 160s, 170s. And I was like, I'm going to do a swing trade. And we were talking about Google or Apple and Google or Apple. I've held a position for as long as I've ever been a long investor in Apple. It's something I'll watch. I actually sold covered calls on Apple all the way up. And to this point, I actually thought about selling more covered calls after the news here, because I said, I'll take the premium. Maybe there's going to be a little more volatility with Apple. I thought about selling more covered calls. And James, this will make you happy. I thought, you know what I'll do is I'll sell a covered call with a pretty close strike. And if it gets called away, my heart won't sink. I will have made a huge profit on Apple. And if it gets called away, I'll go ahead and move my money into something like NVIDIA or a different type of play when it drops TSM on a run. ServiceNow dropped software play. A lot of the software stocks took a hit, and I hold a pretty large position in ServiceNow now. Not to belabor now, but anyway.
Yeah, Kai says it would make me laugh because I always say he's buying his or selling his options too close to the current price, strike price too close to the current price. I went to the dentist this morning, and my dentist owns a bunch of Rivian, like lots and lots and lots of Rivian shares. And I told him, I said, "Hey, like,
conversation was going to go."
Well, I told him, I said, "Hey, like, are you selling calls? Are you selling covered calls against your Rivian shares?" I was like, if the stock's going down, if you're losing money, you might as well make some premium selling calls. And he's like, "Oh, I've heard about that. What is that?" And I told him, I gave him a 2-minute spiel on how you sell covered calls, and his eyes just lit up. Like, we stopped the whole dentistry procedures just to focus on covered calls. The nurse is just like all furious, like, well, "Okay, guys, are you guys done talking about this stuff so we can do this, so we can do the procedure?" So I told him to go watch that Options Alpha podcast, but there's like 250 episodes. I don't know if he will, but
shout out to that. I mean, there's how many episodes? It's a pretty cool. They basically goes Kirk. Yeah, it goes through the basics of trading. And goes through the basics of just actually what I like about Kirk. Check out his podcast. We'll provide a link into in our show notes with this. But he actually uses data and studies to kind of talk about, which it just sings to my heart when he uses actually data to talk about sort of how he trades. But
he doesn't do new episodes, but honestly, all his, like, you learn options almost to an amateur level just from listening to all his old episodes.
Yeah. Well, on CNBC, Mad Money, Kramer says Apple is not a company to trade. It's a company to hold, right? I am right now here on our artificial intelligence podcast saying Apple is a company to trade potentially right now. Right now, the volume's picked up. I'm saying
You're saying to sell call? What are you saying?
I think Apple's made a run. I recently looked at selling
to sell calls, right?
Sell covered calls. Yeah. If you have positions, I went ahead and sold a lot of some puts on Apple when it was in the 170s. 175 was a really good number to me. 170, even 78, close to 180. I sold puts at 180 as well. I was just hoping to get a signed Apple, and I sold covered calls along the way. I think I got called away at like 180, 185, and now I've been just holding my shares. However, I will be looking and selling covered call positions. There are certain stocks I will sell a covered call quite out of the money, or I should not say out of the money, but not close to the current price. My strike will be, in the delta of 10% or something, or even less than that if the premium's okay. However, Apple, I may go ahead and sell a covered call with a strike within a delta of, 40, 50%.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we just about beat the topic to death. To me, it's not the least interesting stock in the world, but it's close to me. Probably has the volatility of a 10-year bonds, so not the most volatile thing in the world. But I own it now. So thanks for listening to our show. Please give us a rating or review, or on YouTube, a like or comment. And we'll be back in the next episode to cover more AI stocks. You can find all our holdings and trades at investingintel.ai. Thanks so much, Kai.
Hey, thanks, James.